interesting rural entrepreneurship models have been created. So one person, after this microgrid was set up, so it provides electricity at homes. But what he did was that he started screening movies, every Friday for the rest of the community, and set up a kind of a theater in these rural areas. He charged about 5 rupees, for as an entry ticket, and using solar energy, to run this kind of whatever. Let's say a makeshift projector. He kind of turned this into a business model, right? So he became a rural entrepreneur in a very, very remote area which had no power. This village is called Lake Walokit Thani. There was a person who set up a chakki mill, flour grinding mill, also again running on solar energy, in which he was able to grind the atta for about 500 villagers and kind of making good money, right? So these are the kind of models which kind of come about, and as somebody has said that India is a nation of entrepreneurs. If you give people the opportunity, and especially if you give people power, let's say electricity, that is a big enabler. So, these models kind of come on its own. There are a lot of high-end kind of jobs being created in the wind sector, which we have seen through Suzlon, because the people there need to work at heights. Windmills, the height of windmills is increasing day by day, and therefore the salaries paid to windmill technicians, because it's a highly skilled job to go up a windmill and do any repairs to the gearbox and all. So some of the people that we have trained at our own training center earn well over 17 to 18,000 rupees even as a starting salary, because which Suzlon is kind of paying. So that is again a kind of interesting area to get into. A lot of our kind of process requirements, we have a massive use of solar thermal. We need to heat a lot of oil. So there's a lot of heating requirement in all process applications. It's again an area which the government has neglected, because while the government is giving fairly, let's say, decent subsidies for solar PV, there is actually very little subsidy for solar thermal energy usage in the industry. Oman is dependent on oil. So in the oil field, they have put the panels, the solar panels in an agricultural greenhouse. Now this is very significant because it substantially reduces the dust and sand which gathers on the panels. So what you do is water is extremely scarce in a desert area, whether it is India or Oman. And you cannot use normal water. You have to use basically, almost mineral water or at least RO purified water to clean panels. You cannot just use the normal water. The solution to this is put the panels in a greenhouse, so that you don't need to clean the panels as such. You clean only the greenhouse walls. That substantially it cuts down the water requirement by 90%. To design mobile solar units in which the panels can actually be dismantled and moved to alternate locations. So let's say if I want to use solar energy for my office, and I shift offices after 5 years, I can dismantle the panels and take them with me. Again, this is very important for industries, because basically, if you, let's say, set up a factory in a new location or want to move any of your units, if the panels can also be taken, that really helps. So there are various solutions to this. For example, putting panels into containers. The container walls open up like a flower, right? And so when you want to transport it, you just close. Just close it back and you can easily transport it like you transport.
Energy equity or energy access to energy access. So it's a trilemma, but the conflict between three objectives. But somehow I would like to believe that energy access is should not be part of the any dilemma or trilemma, because the total energy required to meet 1.2 billion people who do not have access to electricity, or 2.4 billion people who do not have access to commercial cooking fuel. If you initially they need to have the minimum guaranteed supply, and that in terms of total megawatts or total MTOE or whatever, or even the emissions that we are taking, would not be comparable with what we are otherwise using. So like say one village probably when we electrify, especially at the scale that we are doing right now, the total emissions would be a small bit maybe equal to one running an AC in terms of carbon footprints. My focus of whatever I'm going to say is on this sustainability and scalability, and I believe that rest will follow, the livelihood will follow, because there's enough evidence that we need not try and debate that when energy reaches people, it galvanizes the economy, if people find opportunities. So while there are many organizations trying to teach livelihood parting skills, and that's all that is important, but there's a natural process that sets in. We looked at, in fact, after a long time I revisited the numbers, the number of projects which have been sanctioned, the number of projects which have been implemented, and of course I don't have the data out of the total one sanctions. So let's say the 5,000 in last 10-12 years sanctioned, some 305 have been commissioned. And out of that, how many have survived? Not everybody has the skill and commitment the way DA has, so they have 22 projects going and maybe in a sustainable manner. But not everyone has been able to make it successful, and there are a variety of reasons. We all know, people who have worked at the grassroots level, that there are complex issues, variety of issues, and some basic issue is capacity to pay. The two factors that we looked at, capacity to pay and resource availability. Resource availability and capacity to pay. If we were to have a matrix of this, you will have 4 different paradigms of electrification. There will be villages where you have high income and high, at least this is a theoretical part of it, because most of the villages which are in this segment, high income and high resource, they are generally electrified. But theoretically, I think there's one domain which you require entrepreneurial support, institutional support to someone to aggregate the demand and come up with some solution, RE solution. On the other side, you'll have villages which have very low income and low resource. Now, for them you need to pay 50 rupees, 100 rupees would be a challenge. Now, we're talking about many of the projects that I see are in the range of 5 kilowatts or 10 kilowatts. If you aggregate the total revenue, even if the capital equipment is fully subsidized, that has gone down, but let's say it's a CSR project, even then it is not sustainable. And there are other challenges to sustainability, because many of the villages today which are to be electrified are very remote. They are small in size. So first factor, when we're talking about a grassroots level, accessibility of a village, accessibility is one, including the disturbed areas. Size of the village, you have sometimes 15 hamlets, 15 kacha houses or pakka houses. Then capacity to pay and willingness to pay for it. The risk for the entrepreneur. Once he puts up a plant, then whether people pay, I mean, he cannot really, I mean, it cannot be mobile, he cannot really retract it and take it somewhere else. So then other factor would be to sustainability would be economic activity. So if the electricity is there, then the sub-economic activity happens, and you find that at least those people are able to compensate for the electricity which is otherwise, being subsidized. Then we start looking at solarization of agriculture farms. If we have an anchor load, so in each of these villages, most of these villages will have irrigation requirement. Now, and since it is an off-grid, we assume that they are going to use diesel. So it makes immediate sense to convert these diesel pumps, and there are almost 1 million, 9 million pumps diesel, 11 million, the one connected to grid. I will come to the grid as well. You bring in productivity, agriculture, you bring down the cost, and you provide an anchor load. Now, agriculture pumps, on an average, have they are used probably 150 days a year. So, assuming you have 300 sunny days, you have 150 sunny days unutilized, and on a daily basis also, you will have probably 30-40% less utilized, because they will not run throughout the day, they need not run throughout the day. That through storage can then begin to provide stored energy.
We have to make sure in this field, and this is a plea again because of the market development perspective that we have, that we do not make adult rules for teenage children that still need to play. The decentralized renewable energy space, and I'm not saying this just for the sake of decentralization or renewables being something good, is a space where there is a hell of a lot of innovation that still needs to take place. Right? So, the more serious questions of policy, regulation, tariff, etc., to my mind, are premature. Right? Let's see if it could happen with cable TV. Why can't it happen with this? Interestingly and significantly, there are across just UP and Bihar something like 150,000 small diesel genset operators who are today producing electricity in a decentralized manner. Are you going to ignore them? Right? Are you going to say that's not decentralization? Yeah, maybe they use diesel today. Tomorrow, right, they could shift to renewables. In fact, one of the lesser known projects, projects that get talked about are your 22 off-grid plants that are doing reasonably well. The projects that don't get talked about are, a recent project of ours is one in which we converted 5 diesel genset operators to solar energy. Right? Now, the question I have to ask myself, and I certainly ask my team, is can we not convert the 150,000, and there are probably more? I really believe, and many of us working in this area believe, that in the foreseeable future, you will have parallel sources of power generation that will exist in this country. It might exist on account of necessity, it might exist on account of economics, it might exist on account of preference, right? With people, whether they're in urban areas or in rural areas, say we just want control, we want some amount of independence. So I'm going to put those solar panels on my roof. You'll have a panchayat, a village body, saying, why should we be dependent on anyone? Yeah, we know it costs 2.5 times, but we just want control, right? We're going to go find money from somewhere, contribute a bit ourselves, and get this thing going. We have about 1,600 customers in these 22 villages. All 22 of those villages are grid connected, and there is complementarity, or if you like to call it integration, that's happening at the level of the customer. The shopkeepers that we supply Tara Urja to, they actually have our connection, they have a grid connection, and some of them even have their own solar panels, their own little version of a solar home lighting system. Because it's so important for them, right, for their business or their small workshop to have security on the electricity front. They just cannot afford the lights going out between 5:30 and 8:30 in the evening. They lose their customers, their sales for that day drop. So they say, yeah, what the hell, let me spend another 160 rupees for a 2-bulb Tara Urja connection where I can also charge my mobile phone or someone else's, but at least my shop will be lit up. The single indicator that we currently apply for a decentralized power plant in terms of it being successful is, can you bring daytime tariff to below that of what it would cost a diesel genset operator to produce electricity at? Because then you get all the entrepreneurial, all the commercial loads, all the productive loads, what I call pumps and motors in the village. It costs about the equivalent of 18 to 20 rupees a kilowatt hour to produce electricity from a diesel generator. So if you can get your daytime tariff down to 15, you're in business. People need electricity for productive use. Because that megawatt scale solar power plant in Rajasthan is essentially going to help me put a third air conditioner in my house. That's where the electricity is going to flow. Yeah. I incidentally am a person who doesn't have an air conditioner, right? But I'm just making a point that electricity is going to come to your homes, right, and not go out to where people need it. And therefore, in the context of how crucial that third bucket is, where people need electricity and people need electricity for productive uses that are so intricately linked to livelihood security, is where we need to consider decentralization. And of course, renewables are the way to go. I don't think there's any debate on that. You don't want to, like so much of this country is doing, do what I mentioned earlier, which is get a diesel genset and start generating your own electricity, right? Because that currently is how people are running their pumps and motors.
renewable energy and livelihood creation, I think one point that we are missing out on is that it's not just the creation of livelihood through renewable energy that is important.
I'd urge large commercial players to also look at their business and define the business case not from the point of view of an electricity supply company, but from the point of view of a livelihood creation company, right? Because when you do that, you realize that electricity in the bundle of services that you can give to farmers, to again people who want to run, oil expellers, etc. Some of our best customers, incidentally, are tailors.
Shouldn't we, while promoting renewables, also not really massively and promote the improvement and expansion? It hardly needs expansion anymore. The grid is there in most villages by now. There are some extreme cases where it's not, and for that examples, it still could be variable. But shouldn't we work even more aggressively towards grid expansion, getting a good grid, getting an efficient grid, and then integrating renewables?
Right, so the statistic of the government electrifying villages is extremely misleading, right? Because on ground, there are power cuts plus only 10% electrification. So even if the government claims the village as electrified, there is still scope of using renewable energy. Now the second slightly more interesting aspect is, unfortunately we have had a fairly condescending approach to rural areas so far. Now, for example, this Terry's Bachat Lamp Yojana, I know there's someone from Terry and I don't want to be too critical, but that is a very highly condescending approach, right? What has been given out under this million lamp scheme is essentially a torch, right? Which runs on solar. It gives as much light as a torch light. Right? That really doesn't make a difference to people's lives. You have to give them a solution, which is as good as an urban solution.
What about, is there a fear, I don't know, in any sectors, especially maybe I know you said World Energy Council, but in your NTPC role, loss of jobs in the coal sector, is that a concern also? If we go big renewable, is there something going to be destruction of livelihoods?
I think it's everybody has reacted to 1 lakh megawatt, saying that it's a huge thing. Even if 50,000 happens, it will change the game. That is number one. But I personally believe 1 lakh megawatt is possible. There are a lot that needs to be done, but if we start putting everything in order, then announce a thing, then nothing will happen. 20,000 is now become highly doable. You can see every year what is being added. And that's a game changer. If you have to compete with China, you have to do something like this. Now people are even thinking of going backward integration. Solar cells may be manufactured there, the spicing may happen, all that. So I can only say whether it happens or doesn't happen. I believe it will happen. It would have changed the game. Similarly, the electrification, I think some of the implementation, government is, I get that because I have friends who are now, in fact, Secretary Kola, I was talking to him. Which huge commitment things are happening, the push that is happening. The whole chakka was jammed, but now I think it's being galvanized. So I hope, at least I am somebody who generally likes to live with a positive mind, and I believe that things will happen.